Welcome back to Spiritual Foundations, Episode 3. Today we're going to answer the question, what is the purpose of life? One of the most common questions that people ask, and one of the most difficult questions to answer. The framework that I have found most helpful for understanding and answering this question is the channel text, The Law of One. I'm going to share a little bit about what the channel text, The Law of One is. Then we're going to talk about the metaphysics of spiritual evolution and how that relates to our lives on Earth. And we're going to bring everything back to the question of the day. How does all of this tie in to the purpose of life on Earth? Why are we here? Why do we suffer? Is suffering necessary? What does it mean to be enlightened? Is there a way to transcend suffering? All of these questions kind of tie into our main point. The Law of One is a series of channeled messages that came through Carla Rueckert, the channeler, in the 1980s. The questioner was Don Elkins and the scribe was Jin McCarty. The entity that was channeled goes by the name of Ra, a non-physical, highly evolved archangel or social memory complex, which is an enlightened civilization that has become so evolved that they have achieved unity, oneness consciousness, and they're able to merge their minds and speak with one voice. As you know, if you watch my channel, I am generally suspicious of people who claim to channel, and there's reasons for that we will get into in this series. However, the Law of One is one channeled text that I believe is genuine. I believe it was genuinely channeled by higher density beings whose intention is to help humanity evolve. It is full of such deep, profound metaphysical truth. And here's the key. It guides the reader towards love and selfless service to others as the reason for existence and as the answer to life. And that's the number one thing that I always look for in discerning any spiritual teachers, channeled texts, etc. With that brief overview of the Law of One, let's dive into what the Law of One text material says about the evolution of consciousness as a whole. Because once we understand the evolution of consciousness as a whole, what are we doing here, big picture? Then we can look at specifically what are we doing here on Earth. It's one small part of a much larger story. In the previous two videos in this series, we covered how the Law of One, or the idea that everything in existence arose from one underlying source, one underlying consciousness. This is the one immutable metaphysical law of the universe. Ra explains in the Law of One that the first thing in creation was infinity. Infinity then became aware. The word that Ra uses for God or source in the Law of One is intelligent infinity, aware infinity, or we could say consciousness. Consciousness then focused its infinity into creative energy. And this creative energy is love. The physical universe was then created through the metaphysical energy of love condensing into the physical structure of light or photons. The entire physical world is first powered by the creative force of love and encoded through light. Every physical form that exists in the world has a light body that contains all the information for the physical form to manifest. Science would call this process the Big Bang, an explosion of light energy that created the beginning of the universe. Or as in Genesis 1:1, it says, "Let there be light." This was the Big Bang. This is the creator, the intelligent infinity, flinging itself outward in a blissful, joyous act of creation. And now we have individual souls that are ready for a journey back to source. And on this journey of evolution back to source, we evolve through what's called 7 densities of consciousness. And throughout this evolutionary process, we get to experience God's true nature. We get to experience and learn about ultimate reality, which is God, because God is all that exists. Intelligent infinity is all that exists, or love. All of these words that we use to describe God, all of these distortions or perspectives on what God is. Love is all that exists. Our true nature is love. It is peace. It is consciousness. It is infinity. So we now, in the physical universe that has been created by this Big Bang, we have the ability, the privilege, really, to be able to undergo the experience of spiritual evolution. So we could say the purpose of the universe, in the simplest terms, is for God to experience God's own true nature. For God, through us, through each individual soul, to undergo the process of completely forgetting who and what we are, and then get to learn and remember and grow and expand and strengthen our own true nature. Let's talk about the 7 densities of consciousness. This is such a fascinating topic. It is one of my very favorite topics, and it has really given me a framework to understand spiritual evolution and to make the most of my own spiritual growth. The word density simply means the entanglement of light in a certain vibrational range. The lower the density, the lower the vibration of light, the less capacity for the expression of consciousness. Therefore, the more challenge and the more catalyst is available for spiritual growth. You'll understand this as I explain the 7 densities. The first density is the density of beingness. The life forms that develop in first density are the 4 elements of air, water, earth, and fire. They exist in a state of timeless being, have not yet developed awareness of their environment, but they just simply are in pure present moment. First density in our universe lasted hundreds of millions of years, while stars and galaxies and planets were forming. The second density of consciousness is that of awareness. And the life forms that develop during second density consciousness are simple life forms ranging from amoebas to microbial life, to plants, to insects, to many animals. Life forms in second density are learning the lessons of awareness, of responding to the environment, of movement and growth towards the light. And again, second density consciousness in our world lasted millions of years. The third density is the density of self-awareness. Third density life forms include some animals who have begun to develop a sense of self, specifically pack animals like wolves, highly evolved animals like dolphins and whales, pets that respond to their name and understand that they have an identity, and humans, who are the main third density life form on this planet right now. In third density, we are learning the lessons of self-awareness. This is the density where the ego is developed and the separate self emerges in consciousness. It is the only density where psychological suffering occurs because we experience ourselves as a conscious, self-aware entity that is separate from source. Yet it is a necessary step on the overall evolutionary path, because the point is for us to become self-realized. The point is for us to go from being completely undifferentiated, no awareness of who we are, through this grand awakening process until we reunite with Source. You can't recognize yourself as Source. You can't become self-realized if at some point you don't develop a sense of self. And that's what third density is all about. Also, in third density, we experience the illusion or the distortion of polarity. the choice between service to self and service to others, fear and love, dark and light. We get to make this choice during third density. The fourth density is the density of love and unity consciousness. Fourth density beings evolve slowly into light bodies that have a much greater capacity for spiritual and psychic abilities, and also suffering ends in fourth density consciousness because the sense of self that is developed in the third density expands to include the other. The main recognition in fourth density consciousness is that you are me and I am you. We are all part of one consciousness. And so when you realize that you are one with everything, you begin to experience bliss. There is no reason to suffer anymore because everyone treats everyone with the utmost love and respect. So in fourth density civilizations, there is no psychological suffering. There is very little sickness. Any issue that develops in the body can be easily healed by the laying on of hands, and everybody lives in bliss and harmony. Fifth density is the density of wisdom. Another way that wisdom can be explained is self-sufficiency. So if third density is the development of self-awareness, fourth density is the development of selfless service, selflessness. Fifth density is the development of self-sufficiency. It's balancing the love and selfless service and martyrdom of the 4th century with self-sufficiency, with wisdom that says, I can love others and I can love myself at the same time, and both are equally important. When you think fifth density being, think somebody like Buddha, who spends most of his life meditating in a cave, learning the wisdom teachings, high-level manifestation, spiritual and psychic abilities that are only safely developed after you've already learned love and dedicated yourself in service to others. As a side note, this is where spiritual teachings get off track. Anytime a spiritual teacher or a spiritual path veers off into darkness, it is because someone tries to use wisdom or self-sufficiency teachings before they've integrated and embodied love. And they end up prioritizing their own power, their own abilities at the expense of others. We'll go more in depth on that in the upcoming video on discernment. The 6th density is the density of integration, or learning to perfectly balance 4th density love teachings and 5th density wisdom teachings, or to perfectly balance love of others with love of self. Or we could say to perfectly balance selflessness with self-sufficiency. These are the two polarities of the Creator, love and wisdom. And ultimately, both of them have to be in perfect balance in order for a being to reunite with Source. And so the 6th density is about finding perfect balance and integration of love and wisdom. The 7th density is where reunification with Source occurs. And not a lot is known about the 7th density because the entity Ra that channeled this material was a 6th density consciousness. Another point that I want to make about evolution through the 7 densities is that each density is sort of pulled by the gravity of the density above it. So 1st density life forms like rock, water, air are being pulled by the lessons of awareness from the 2nd density above it. So you have to begin to develop awareness to graduate into the 2nd density. 2nd density life forms, like for instance animals, are being pulled by the lessons of self-awareness from the 3rd density. So an animal has to begin to develop self-awareness before it can reincarnate as a human, for instance. So your dog is beginning to learn the lessons of self-awareness by responding to their name, by coming when they're called. They're starting to experience themselves as an entity, separate from the rest of their environment. And so it is in 3rd density consciousness where humanity is at right now. Actually, according to Ra, our planet shifted into a 4th density consciousness in the year 2012. And we are being strongly pulled by the lessons of love and unity consciousness from the fourth density so that we can fully transition over the next hundreds to thousands of years into an enlightened fourth density civilization. This is why you see the turmoil happening, the corruption being exposed, people awakening, spiritual teachings becoming more widely accepted in practice. We're going through a transition from third density consciousness into fourth density consciousness. And this is why so many near-death experiencers say that it is inevitable that we will become an enlightened society. It's up to us how we get there. We can avoid the turmoil of the process by consciously choosing to use our life catalyst to develop ourselves into fourth density beings. And then the process of transition will be much smoother than if we are sort of pushed along by our karma, right? But either way, it's going to happen. We have spent the last how many tens to hundreds of thousands of years, maybe even more than that, depending on how far back our history goes, learning the lessons of self-awareness. If you look back through history, there's been so much war and violence and bloodshed and turmoil and strife and suffering. It's because we've been developing emerging self-awareness. So if we compare the 7 densities of consciousness to a school, we could say that first density consciousness is like preschool, second density consciousness of plants and animals is like kindergarten, third density consciousness is like grade school, and that's where we're at right now. We're like little children that are still learning the basics of reading and writing and mathematics. Fourth density consciousness is like high school, fifth density consciousness is like college, and sixth density consciousness is like graduate school. So when you understand it within that perspective, it becomes clear why there's been so much turmoil. We're children learning the basics of consciousness right now. We're developing emerging self-awareness, which up to this point, our self-awareness has only included ourselves. We are learning the lessons that everyone and everything shares the same consciousness. As we develop into a fourth density enlightened civilization, we will begin to not only intellectually understand, but actually experience everyone and everything else as part of us. And when we get to the point where we can experience the whole world as part of ourselves as one great self, we will be fully in fourth density. Suffering will end. We will be living in harmony and bliss. And we will begin at that point to be pulled by the gravity of the fifth density teachings. And we'll begin learning the lessons of more and deeper self-sufficiency to balance with our love and selfless service of others. So we could say also that consciousness sleeps in the rock, dreams in the animal, awakens in the human, expands in fourth density, and refines itself in fifth density, perfectly balances itself in sixth density. The interesting thing about the 7 densities of consciousness is that each of the 7 densities corresponds to an energy center in the human body. So the first density of beingness corresponds to the root center. The second density of awareness corresponds to the sacral center. The third density of self-awareness corresponds to the solar plexus center. The fourth density of love corresponds to the heart center. The fifth density of wisdom corresponds to the throat center. The sixth density of balance and integration corresponds to the third eye center. And then reunification with source, the seventh density, of course, corresponds to the crown center of cosmic consciousness. The spiritual evolution that is happening on a macro scale corresponds with the spiritual evolution that each of us experiences on a micro scale. Each one of us activates our energy centers as we move through the densities of consciousness. Every conscious life form has 7 energy centers. First density life forms have the root center activated. Second density life forms have the root and sacral centers activated. So most animals have the lower 2 energy centers only activated and will activate the third energy center, the solar plexus center, once they develop self-awareness. The majority of humans have the root, sacral, and solar plexus centers activated and are working on unlocking the heart. Ra explains in the Law of One that the first 3 energy centers are the egoic centers, and they must be fully balanced before the heart can be activated. Once the heart is activated, energy is free to rise from the lower 3 centers all the way up to the crown, and the throat and third eye centers are available to do work in. So the higher centers from the heart upward are locked until a person fully balances and learns the lessons of the lower 3 energy centers, or the first 3 densities of consciousness. So to clarify, in most humans, the root, sacral, and solar plexus centers are activated and opened because we've already evolved through first and second density consciousness and are currently in third, moving into fourth. But there's still work left to do. There's leftover residual work based on our experiences in this lifetime and previous lifetimes that we need to fully balance and integrate in order to move into the heart. The root is about survival, safety, and security in the physical body. The sacral is about self-love and self-acceptance and emotional health and balancing. The solar plexus is about self-empowerment and your relationship with others in the social structure. All of these lessons have to be learned, balanced, and integrated before a human can fully move into the heart center and activate the heart. At the heart, we reach the level of unity consciousness, abundance consciousness, a state of giving and receiving effortlessly with life. As we collectively move into fourth density consciousness as a species, each one of us will individually move into heart-based consciousness on our personal evolutionary journeys. This is why love is taught by all of the world's major religions and spiritual paths, because love is the primary lesson of the third density, which humanity is in now. In order for us to evolve fully from third density to fourth density consciousness to transcend suffering and create a world of peace and harmony on the earth, the primary lesson that we have to learn is how to love each other. It is the only thing that we have to learn. It is the most pressing issue for human consciousness right now. We all have to learn the lessons of love in order to progress. I'd like to pause and let you guys know that if you like what you're hearing in this video, and if you would like a coach to help you embody these teachings to become more loving and peaceful and free and abundant in your life, I am now offering one-on-one energy healing and intuitive coaching sessions. If you want to work with me one-on-one, simply to receive a divine love transmission or energy work for a specific challenge you're dealing with, or if you want some spiritual coaching and guidance on how to embody love and embody peace and connect with your divine nature, connect with your guidance and your spiritual gifts, check here for the link to my one-on-one sessions. Thank you for listening. Now let's get back to the show. The various spiritual paths in our world, interestingly, are a mixture of fourth density love teachings and fifth density wisdom teachings. And this is because many of the world's major religions have actually been founded by higher density, fourth density or fifth density beings who have come back and incarnated into third density to help humanity progress. A prime example of this is Jesus. The Law of One says that Jesus was a fully activated fourth density being that was actually ready to move into fifth density. But as a perfectly developed fourth density being would do, he decided to come back to third density and help humanity by fully embodying fourth density consciousness for us and showing us what it looks like. If every person lived at the level that Jesus did, we would be in an enlightened society today. And the religion that developed in Jesus' name, Christianity, originally Jewish Christianity, was about devotion to God, love your neighbor, and selfless service to others. Still today, with all of its distortions, Christianity tends to be a religion that prioritizes devotion over wisdom, often misplacing passion and devotion and lacking wisdom to understand the metaphysical principles behind its teachings. The Buddha is an example of a fifth density being that incarnated to help humanity by teaching the lessons of wisdom. The Buddha taught love also, but the Buddha taught love not from a perspective of selfless service and martyrdom like Jesus did, but from the perspective of non-attachment, which is a higher viewpoint on what love is. Non-attachment is a wisdom teaching that is based on the foundation of already understanding love. And once you understand love, you can then love people better by realizing, rather than giving myself as a martyr, I'm going to be fulfilled in love myself so that I can allow people to be where they are at, and I can better perceive actually what they need from me. Whereas Jesus gave himself as a martyr, many Eastern teachers have actually secluded themselves from society, taking the position that the best way they can help the planet to evolve is to focus on their own evolution. Buddhism, the religion started in the name of Buddha, teaches love through the lens of wisdom. The greatest compassion that I can offer another is to be completely fulfilled and love myself. Therefore, I can allow each person to be where they are without being offended, attached, or in judgment. This wisdom teaching can only be properly integrated if love has been fully embodied first. And this is why almost every mystical and spiritual path in the world today teaches love either from a fourth density love perspective or a fifth density wisdom perspective. Like we just said, Buddhism teaches love as non-attachment. When I'm not attached to anything, I can love it unconditionally without putting expectations on it. Hinduism teaches love through non-doership. Living in flow with life rather than resisting it is the epitome of unconditional love. Mindfulness, being present with what is, leads a person to the recognition that love is all that exists in the present moment. Gratitude, loving and blessing everything that you come into contact with, is a fast track to enlightenment because it immerses your consciousness in love. Now let's take all of this information and bring it back to our question of the day. What is the purpose of life? All this metaphysical information is great, but what does it have to do with me? The purpose of a third density lifetime is quite literally to learn about love. This is why every NDE year gives the same response to this question. Life is the school of learning how to love. Because we are in third density consciousness, developing into fourth density consciousness, and we have to learn the lessons of love in order to evolve into an enlightened society. So it really is that simple. We are here to learn about love. It is the one and only overriding goal of our lives. Every other purpose that we may have ties into love. Let's use the analogy of working out at a gym. When you first begin to lift weights at a gym, your muscles experience a lot of soreness until you develop them to the point where you can lift 10 times the amount of weight you did in the beginning without getting sore. The weight is the density or the challenge. Remember how I said in the beginning that the term density refers to the entanglement of light at a certain vibratory pattern, and the lower the density, the lower the vibration of light, the less capacity to express consciousness. The more challenge associated with expressing consciousness. So you can compare the consciousness of a rock to the consciousness of an ant, to the consciousness of a dog, to the consciousness of a human. We're not saying that any one of them is more or less conscious. Just farther along the evolutionary path you go, the more opportunity you have to express consciousness. As humans, we have higher brain functions. We can use language. We can use tools. There's more capacity to express consciousness. And each density has its own catalyst or challenge associated with expressing consciousness. And in third density, the main catalyst is psychological suffering. Psychological suffering happens when we attach our sense of okayness to anything outside of ourselves. Anything that we attach our sense of okayness to, like I need life to go this way, I need this thing to happen in order for me to feel at peace and to be okay and to feel secure, we give our power away to that thing and we suffer. So just like lifting weights at a gym, when you first begin to experience the catalyst of third density consciousness, the challenge of expressing consciousness in the third density, you can experience a lot of psychological suffering. Like the weight at the gym allows your muscle to become more of what it already is, to become a bigger, stronger muscle. The challenges of third density, the suffering we experience in third density, allows us to become more of what we already are, or allows us to connect more deeply with and express and experience our true nature, which is unconditional love, peace, and bliss. So just like at the gym, when you intentionally lift the weight to make your muscle more of what it is, you can intentionally make use of your life catalysts, situations that cause psychological suffering, to intentionally connect yourself with your true nature. You can grow your capacity to handle challenges without suffering, just like you can grow your capacity to lift weights without getting sore. True liberation is not in avoiding suffering, but being able to experience circumstances that could cause suffering, but you are unaffected by it. When you no longer need anyone or anything outside of you to make you feel okay and at peace and secure, you have much less capacity to suffer because of life circumstances. The reason that we incarnate into these third density lifetimes is to develop self-awareness and expand that self-awareness into unity consciousness. The whole process is about learning about our true nature and connecting with it tangibly, experiencing it. We come here to develop the capacity to access our true nature of peace and bliss and love while under pressure. If you try to avoid any situation that could cause suffering, if you say, I just want my life to go smoothly and perfectly and everything to work out the way that I want it to, that's great, but you haven't addressed the underlying issue, which is that you need to develop your capacity to experience your own true nature. This is why I don't agree with people who say, I'm never coming back here, I'm done with life on earth, it's too hard, I'm getting out of here and I'm never coming back. Because you take your state of consciousness with you no matter where you go. You can experience hellish realms in any life, in any incarnation, in any world or dimension. Even on the other side, people experience hellish realms. Freedom is not in avoiding hellish realms or challenging situations or suffering. Freedom is developing the capacity to remain in peace and bliss and unconditional love and transform suffering into joy, transform hellish realms into heaven through your state of consciousness. An enlightened being is not someone who says, I'm never coming back here because I don't want to suffer. An enlightened being is someone who's developed the capacity to no longer suffer when faced with challenges. An enlightened being is somebody who has developed themselves spiritually to the point where they can stay in peace and groundedness and unconditional love, even while walking through hell. And in that way, they can be of help to other souls, because they can offer strength and peace and joy and love that the other souls need in order to rise out of the hellish realms themselves. This is what Buddhism calls liberation. It's what Christianity calls salvation. Call it whatever name that you will. This is the point of physical incarnations on earth. It's to develop the capacity to not suffer when faced with challenging situations. It's to develop the capacity to walk through hell and experience it as heaven and transmute it into heaven for people who are trapped there with your state of consciousness. This is what Jesus came back to third density to do. He came back into a very hellish earth realm where there was so much violence and ego. And his presence here, his incarnation here, where he channeled and lived in the I am state to the point where he was able to undergo a crucifixion and have it be just easy for him to forgive anyone because he wasn't suffering. He was enlightened. An enlightened being has transcended suffering. And because of his incarnation here, A Course in Miracles says, the rest of our enlightenment is guaranteed. Because all minds are connected as one. One being achieving enlightenment guarantees that the rest will follow. It shifts something. It transmutes something in consciousness so that the rest of us can also be liberated. But let's tie this all back to our question of the day. What is the purpose of life on earth? As every NDEer and spiritual experiencer has said, the purpose of life on earth is to love. Love is the lesson for third density consciousness. In order to develop into an enlightened society, we have to learn the simple lesson of love. It's not always easy by any means, but it is always simple. How can you change the world? How can you transcend suffering? How can we create an enlightened society? The answer is simple. Go home and love your neighbor. No matter what challenge life presents you with, the answer is always love. When we learn the lessons of love, we will transcend suffering. Not by getting out of here, not by avoiding it, but through learning the lessons of love. This is the only way. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to check the description for the link to my one-on-one sessions. If you want something that's priced a little bit cheaper, but still gives you tremendous value and benefits, in my community group, Love Covered Life Sanctuary, you'll find all of the support you're looking for on your spiritual evolutionary journey. We do bi-weekly live energy work and coaching calls. We do daily discussion prompts, and we do monthly spiritual embodiment challenges to help you actually integrate and experience the things I'm teaching, to actually connect with your true nature and start experiencing divine bliss, peace, and abundance in your life. Check here for the link to the Sanctuary, my Pay What You Can membership. Go live your most extravagantly loving life, and I'll see you next time.